Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Donald.
I'd like to call this meeting to order. The time is now 4:43 p.m. As a reminder, please note the BERS meetings are being recorded for the convenience of those unable to attend this video conference. A recording of the closed captioning will be posted to the BERS YouTube channel following the meeting. Sharon, can you please call the roll?
Adriana Alicia is not here. Muriel Ali.
Present.
Thank you. Karine Apollon.
Present.
Thank you. Bibi Shade Arnold is not here. Shirley Aubin.
Present.
Thank you. Erin Bogard is not here. Camille Cazaretti is not here. Marjorie Deanstead.
Present.
Amy, thank you. Amy Fair is not here. Gregory Faulkner.
Present.
Thank you. Anita Garcia is not here. Anthony Giordano.
Here.
Thank you. Dr. Angela Green.
Present.
Thank you. Nibby Tesson is not here. Allison Hirsch.
John Dorset for Control and Lander. Allison.
Thank you. Alice Ho.
Present.
Thank you. Rima Izquierdo is not here. Jessamine Lee.
Present.
Thank you. John Maderick.
Frank Zerbella, John Leonard.
Thank you. Donald Nesbitt.
Present.
Sharon Odwest.
Here.
Thank you. Alan Ong is not here. Mahisha South.
Present.
Thank you. Thomas Shepard is not here. Venus, say thank you. And Manny Tavares is not here.
Do we have a quorum?
Yeah.
Thank you. The first item on the calendar is calendar item number 1, noted of the minutes of the meeting of the Board of Retirement System on September 10th, 2024. May I have a motion to consider?
So moved.
Motion made by Tony. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second, Karina Pollen. All those in favor of approving the minutes for September 10th, 2024, please respond in favor. In favor. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries. The next item on the agenda is an update from the Executive Director, Sandy Rich. Sandy?
And I will try to keep this short because we do have a packed schedule. I want to thank everyone for coming first. Thank you for being here. We've received a number of awards recently. I think some of this will be a repeat. We are the number 4th best municipal pension fund in the country. Okay, that's a repeat. And we recently got recognized by the Public Pension Standards Award Coordinating Council. They need a new name. That we are in recognition of meeting professional standards for plan funding and administration as set forth in public pension standards as defined by that organization, the PPCC. Just another award. We're doing great. You understand that the criteria for this award is basically to be either fully funded or expect to be fully funded in the next 4 years. We fully intended to make a presentation to this board tonight about a budget request related to auto enrollment. Remind everyone that on October 1st, we basically had a significant improvement in our membership count as a result of the auto enrollment of previously unenrolled people who work for the Board of Education but never joined BERS. That would have upped our membership by 28,000. That's our count. We had about 1,000 people who opted out. But we're not making that budget proposal because 2 weeks ago, the governor signed Chapter 551, and Sharon will give you the more detailed reference information. But Chapter 551 creates an opportunity for many UFT union members who are currently members of BERS to transfer to TRS. Now that will have a number of knock-on effects. One, it'll offset some of the membership increases that auto enrollment created in October 1st. And let me remind you that when we ask for additional operating staff to accommodate auto enrollment, it'll be over a extended period of time that responsibility will accumulate on our operations. So we don't need anything immediately. So that will settle in as we figure out what Chapter 551 does. But chapter 551 will allow 55, the estimate, and I'm referring now to the Office of the Actuary's fiscal note, which was drafted about a year and a half ago. It will allow 5,500 currently identified UFT union members who are BERS members currently to transfer to TRS. So that will be a significant increase in transfers out. They have a year to do it. The profile of something like this is 100% generally don't transfer. There is some question about the count, and we're working on that. There's some data questions that we're working on. We've only had 2 weeks to actually prepare for this. And the transfers out are a manual process. So if we got 5,500 transfers out on February 1st, which is extraordinarily unlikely, it could take us 2 or 3 years to process them. So we need to be able to respond. We're working on that. The initial response will be a budget increase request for overtime and temporary staff help. Now, we've only been working on this for the last 2 weeks, and we don't expect the board to approve this. But at a minimum, we would hope that the board would approve it in January, when we can give you more detail if you're unwilling to approve it now. But the request will be for basically $723,000 of PS, which would cover overtime and the fringe related to that for current staff to work overtime. We don't have very much overtime in the budget right now. And an OTPS request of $343,000 to cover temporary staff, external consultants, and a CPMS update to accommodate what we hope to automate part of this process, which previously our transfers out are single digit every quarter. They're very small. And this will be a significant change. So we expect to make, it would constitute basically a 3% increase in our combined PS and OTPS budget. Basically, it boils down to $1 million, give or take a couple of thousand. We are prepared to ask for that now, but if the board wants to have more information, we will ask for it in more detail in January. I would ask if the trustees are willing to propose that we approve it, but we can do that in just a second. The other impact is that this will involve the transfer of assets along with liabilities when these people move, right? And that estimate coming from the Office of the Actuary, and we've had this conversation earlier today on the executive committee. The actuary's estimate is that number is about $730 million in the defined benefit program. And what the actuary didn't look at this, but our preliminary analysis of where the members who can cross over exist, they have about $500 million of TDA fixed exposure. We blend those into the DB plan, and if they move, all of it will move. So it could be 1.2 billion. So the executive committee is going to be working on this along with well, we're going to be talking to the actuary, but along with our consultants and along with BAM and the controller to actually see how this will work. And the good news about all this is this will take years to play out, and probably it will be a asymptotic distribution because we'll have probably some early transfers out requests and it'll tail off through the year. So I would like to find one more item before we go back to this question. This will also impact our lease negotiations. It's a good thing we know about this because we probably won't need to take this whole floor. We are in negotiation with the underlying owner of this property, Retirement System of Alabama, to establish a lease that will replace our June 2026 expiration sublease. They are the best alternative we're finding. We've been working with a broker on this. We will probably enter into serious negotiations in the next month or two, and we will probably not be spending as much as we were going to.
To stay here?
Yes, to stay here. This is the cheapest alternative, boiling it down to. And then finally, before we get back to this budget thing, for educational opportunities, January 21st to 24th, the Coriad Plan sponsor Educational Institute. If you want to go to this event, it's in Key West, Florida. We will pay your expenses. We can register you. Please reach out to Karen. We have trustees who are attending. I'm actually managing a panel that will present on private credit. And so let's go back to the budget request. Specifically, I have a memo that I can distribute to everyone from fiscal ops, but we are basically asking for an increase in PS of $723,100 and an increase in OTPS to cover consultants' expenses, CPNMS updates, temporary staff, and supplies for $343,000.
I just want to make sure I understand, this increase is just for the new legislation, or is this for the auto enrollment? Are they
It
two
would pick
separate
up-
things, or would it pick
yeah.
up both?
It would pick up some auto enrollment, but there's very little of that actually hitting us right now. This is basically 95 to 98% Chapter 551 impacts.
And how soon do you think that spending will be required?
Well, they could start, they have the window open December 10th. We haven't gotten any transfer requests.
December 10th, you said?
Yep, it opened up December 10th.
Mhm.
The process is they have to go to UFT, get an enrollment application. UFT requests a transfer. So I would expect to see waves of transfers in January.
And then,
And the UFT is out there on social media advocating for this.
and then the other question I have for you is, you're only on the PS side allowing for overtime. Do you have sufficient staff that can handle the amount of overtime without burnout and without, right? Because
Probably not.
originally I thought there was gonna be a request on the table for increased budget
Increased
for
headcount.
staffing, increased headcount.
Yeah.
That's not that. This is
That's not that. Matter of fact, the reason we're not asking for that is we need to get a better handle on how Chapter 551 will offset the auto enrollment demands. And to be honest, we don't know yet. And if we put in headcount, we're kind of locked in. So this gives us flexibility, and this would cover us through the rest of the fiscal year.
We use temps theoretically.
Temps and OT. It'll be mostly OT because most of this work, you need access to systems. And temps do not have access to systems. Yes, John?
You know I have a bunch of questions, but I'm just gonna try to keep it high level.
Yep.
Have you expended all of the resources in the last budget? Or is there money that hasn't been spent that could simply be repurposed for the next 6 months instead of asking for a budget modification?
Well, we can't repurpose OTPS to PS, which is where the demand is. We have existing overtime that we haven't used, which would probably get us well into January unless the transfers surge, but I don't expect them to. So that's why when I introduced this idea, if we don't approve it tonight, it's not like a crisis will occur. We probably won't get pressure until February or March.
And then my other question is, when you renegotiate the lease, is it expected that there will be a increase or a decrease in the actual lease?
It'll be an increase, our expectation.
Okay,
We pay $2.2 million a year right now. We pay, like, on average, I think that lease was $36 a square foot. The current going rate, the competitive bid from One New York Plaza was 65. Competitive bid from 120 Broadway was 60. It was in the 60s, I think it was 60. Competitive bid here, and we haven't negotiated it, was in the 40s. And
I'm just cognizant of the fact that any budget that gets approved by any of the retirement systems, this one included, if the board fails to pass the next budget the next year, you revert back.
Yep.
If we have a situation where you're inadvertently spiking the budget in 1 year, then the next year it would either cause the board to cull it back, or if there's loggerheads and we can't approve a budget, it's at the higher amount. So I'm not suggesting that you're trying to game the system. That's not my. But I'm just cognizant from a fiduciary standpoint that a one-time ask is a one-time ask, but a one-time ask that gets carried over for multiple years, as there's a potential for a diminishing population that you're servicing. You know, I would need to see that a little bit more.
so just on that, I mean, this information will have to be more refined, right? So for fiscal 2026, we hope to have a more refined analysis of what our long-term headcount needs will be. But here are the very simple numbers that we have. If we added 28,000 new members from auto enrollment And the actuary's analysis is we're gonna lose 5,500 members moving from BERS to TRS. We're still gonna have an increase in our underlying membership count, and we will highly likely ask for more headcount. It's certainly not gonna be the same number of headcount that we would have asked for if we hadn't had Chapter 551 event.
There's be a budget earmarking as needed.
Yeah, I would say there's at least a 50% probability we wouldn't use all this money. This is kind of a worst case. I would argue that on any major financial event in someone's life, most people don't make big changes unless they see major benefits. But then again, I can't underestimate the UFP's willingness and desire to market this to these people and get them to move, even though it may not be a financial benefit, a big financial benefit. It's definitely a financial benefit.
So I would recommend that we move to adopt your
Question.
proposal based on the fact that we have a quorum right now.
Frank? I have no vote, but I have a voice. Thank you, Mr. Faulkner.
So you'd have to call a roll call vote.
That's it.
Because you would need every single person, and right, there's 15 people, there's how many people?
15. If there's a no vote, John, do you intend to vote no?
Without any information? Yes.
Okay, then we'll take this up in January.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll take it up in January.
I'm not prepared to vote without any
Fair.
material for.
It's fair, but then if we run into a problem and then we run into difficulty fulfilling what needs to be done,
Then we will address that with actual information rather than just a statement from the executive director on what the potential needs are for an action that we haven't seen one person take advantage of yet. So I just don't think it's fiscally responsible to take a budget item and just vote on it without any material other than a conversation about something that's potentially going to happen. I'm sorry, but that just wouldn't be prudent for me to vote on without any supporting information. I hope you can respect that.
be spent unless we needed to.
Yeah, but
It's based on the FinOp stock.
I would say, like I indicated, we probably have sufficient room in the budget to handle this through January and likely February. So this is not a developing crisis. This is going to be a very slow burn event. Very slow burn event.
All right.
And I'll share the memo. This is from my fiscal ops. We'll share a presentation in January.
Can I just ask a question also as
Yep.
as it relates to this? We probably should, I'd like to see, for me, a more comprehensive around the incremental for the increase in headcount as well, right? Because we shouldn't be doing these things in isolation. While this is more urgent, we probably should start to look at it in collectively to see what the impact's gonna look like.
And we're actually rerunning all our staffing models to try to figure that out. And
Yep.
it'll invariably have some assumptions about what happens between BERS and TRS because we know exactly what's happening with auto enrollment.
Yep.
We have a direct count. So
And the other question would be around how are we leveraging technology? Because everything you're saying is manually. If we can get smarter about leveraging technology, AI, whatever,
Yep.
while it's new, it will help to create greater efficiencies.
Well, part of that request that we would be talking about in January included
Is
money for
include that.
CPMS. We can actually fund that independent of this approval and we can move money around in OTTS to take care of that.
Got it.
We can do that and we will.
I'll just make one last statement on this. I think at some point too, we need to invest in some type of communication, ongoing communication with our members. The reason being when things like this occur, members actually already have an understanding of what the system is actually doing versus us being reactive when these kind of things happen.
We are active on social media. We are.
Sorry,
We've been-
can't
we've
hear.
been-
Yeah,
down
if
here.
Veronica, please speak
No,
loudly.
so Sandy or you need me to repeat what I said?
You, Donald, because you're facing.
So I said, I think we need to invest in communication, ongoing communication on the progress of that this board is doing. That way, when bills like this are passed, we don't have to be reactive to it. And members are informed as to what we're doing versus the of the options that they have versus going somewhere else.
So can I just ask, I'm gonna throw this back at you, Donald. What would that look like to you, real quick, if you could do that in like less than 10 seconds, bro?
Communication, ongoing communication, it depends, right? So people use smartphones and communication in that way, right? Social media, a newsletter. So the accomplishments, as Sandy said, we rank fourth in the country as far as funding and everything. I don't think a lot of members know that, right? Those things should be highlighted and go out there to them, right? If I'm making a sound decision or me transferring to another system and one was ranked number 4 and the other one wasn't, I'm like my decision is made, right? For me. But if I don't know that, right, it just leaves the door open for me to make a decision that may not be in my best interest.
I'm not, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I think in years past, I think there was the line, and I believe that members should be able to put their money where they want to put their money. But the line of demarcation was non-pedagogical versus pedagogical. I think that was from Bob North. Did the state come to you and ask you about this at all for this legislation?
No.
So the state has the agency to change this on their own. Erase that line that Bob North had created.
Yeah, pension law gives the state they can alter or amend.
And I'm just wondering what the rationale that Bob North had originally created that.
He didn't create. Bob, with all due respect, didn't create that. No, he did not create that line. That's a legislative line. You can look in the education code, you look in the administrative code, and it spells out who goes into
Non-pedagogical versus.
Yeah, that's not a. That's not from the actuary didn't create the calculation on what system you go into. With all due respect to the actuary and the wisdom.
You should have all the power.
All right,
Okay, so
that was it.
Sorry,
thank
when we get there, when it comes to communication, opt-in alerts, key alerts that they should know. So they can opt in, they get alert, they want more information, they check out the newsletter or their email. So they should, so prompt them like, oh, so there's some significant change that I need to know.
Yep. Thank you.
I think there's also like, just working intra-community, there is a compound trauma of things just being last minute and always in urgency mode. I would like to see some of that, relieved, but just getting information out there in a timely fashion,
Absolutely. Thank you.
Can I just say one more thing? It just occurred to me, if the members union, right, for all intents and purposes, is communicating with their members, right? At some point, we can communicate as BERS, or the other systems can communicate as their own systems. But I don't think that communication should replace the notification that they get from their own representatives, right? So, we're all in this together kind of thing. So like, I just want to make sure that we don't inadvertently create a situation where we're either not notifying somebody because we think somebody else is doing it and vice versa. So I'm just cognizant of all of the parties, because we're talking about a group of folks that aren't represented necessarily they don't have a labor representative on this particular board, right? The group that we're talking about communicating with, right? Because we're talking about the folks that are eligible to transfer, correct? Or are we talking about everybody? I think that's what I'm trying to understand.
My comment was constant communication, John, with everyone.
Oh, okay.
That is a member of the system.
Thank you for clarifying that, because I thought we were talking about.
Because if we did a targeted, if what you're talking about, John, UFT is not the only one that doesn't have labor representation here.
No, I understand. That's what I'm saying. There's other. That's why I was saying, like, I just wanted to make sure we were.
Yeah, no, my comments were, as we have accomplishments, I don't know what TRS, NYCBERS, or whatever everyone else does. But as a member of BERS, I would certainly like to see if there's an accomplishment we're fourth in the country.
Right.
As a member of BERS, I would certainly like that communication, right? That would be something that should be that should be known to me as a member of the system. So I'm talking about constant communication to everyone.
Yeah, anytime there's change like this, and if there's a benefit to us, whether they leave or stay, we have to be on the offense
Yeah.
of communicating and sharing the why and what's available. We shouldn't just sit back and let things happen to us. If it benefits us as a pension fund to maintain, then we have to tell them the story why they should stay.
Yeah, I was just clarifying who we were communicating.
Other people mystifying us.
Thank you, Sandy. The report of the next item on the agenda is calendar item 2 through 17, the ordinary business of BERS. May I have a motion to consider? Motion made by Tony, second by Kareem. Sharon, can you tell us about the ordinary business of BERS?
Sure. These are the retirements, refunds, and death benefits processed since the last time the board met.
Thank you. We'll now go to a vote on calendar items 2 through 17. All those in favor of approving the ordinary business of BERS, please indicate if you're in favor. In favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries. Resolution. This resolution was on
Matt,
here.
Rick, we can,
Yeah, but we took
we
care of
took
that.
care of it.
There was a resolution on here for us to honor John Matterich, who was, or give him a commendation for his work. John Matterich was a trustee of this board and chair at one time of the board as well for about 8.5 years. He received a commendation from the executive committee from the executive director. So just point that out to the board. Next up
Where
is
is he now? He's no longer on board?
no.
He's actually represented by Frank
Frank
as
today.
Frank as alternate, and Kevin Troy is our new alternate that was elected in the vote this year, and he's officially starting January 1st.
So Frank is the new board appointee, and Kevin will back him up if we can make him stay.
Don't scare him away.
Please be on your best behavior so you can come back.
Don't scare him away.
And while we're doing acknowledgements, Allison Hirsch is leaving controller's office as of 12/31, John, and John will be the primary, replacing Allison.
Do we have any input on that?
No.
I have to vote on that. I'm not sure if I accept that.
The next calendar item is calendar item number 19, the Grand Thornton 2024 Annual Audit Presentation. May I have a motion to discuss?
So moved.
Motion by Kareem, second by Tony. Sharon Campbell for Grand Thornton is here to discuss this agenda item. Campbell?
We can't hear you.
You're muted.
We can't hear you, Sharon. Is that our side or hers?
I think it's our side.
Uh-oh.
No. We tested it
I
before.
read lips, I can
Please
tell
turn
you.
this
I
off
can
at some
translate.
point when we were having a conversation. So
I can't hear her either. It's not just the room.
So Leah just gave a test. So she's good. So just let them know.
No, trust it. You just didn't have any issues.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, there we go.
You can hear me?
Hi,
Yeah.
Sharon. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so now that we got that settled, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Sharon Campbell. I'm a managing director in Grant Thornton's Employee Benefit Plan Audit Practice, and I was the lead engagement partner on this audit this year, as well as the last 4 years. Before I share my screen, I do want to express my appreciation for management for their assistance throughout this entire audit process. They've always been really helpful and very responsive to our inquiries, so thank you very much. So with that, I'm going to try to share. Hopefully I don't have technical issues with sharing. It's not giving me the option to. Let's see.
Option to share.
Share. Okay. Oh, there we go. Okay. It's kicking in. It's just taking, I think my computer's just a little tired today. Okay. Can everyone see my screen?
no.
All right. It's,
Give it a second. It may take a while.
Yeah, sometimes there's a lag. Sharon, can you speak a little louder? One of the trustees commented that you're a little inaudible. Yeah.
sure. Can you hear me now?
Still a little muffled. I think it's us.
All right. I'll try to speak a little louder. Can you hear
Yeah,
me?
thank you, Sharon. Thank you.
No worries.
And we can see the presentation.
All right.
Presentation's up.
Okay. So with me today, I have Will Richardson on the line. I also have Andy Zimick from our actuarial office, from our one of our actuarial specialists. This slide just goes over some of the other teammates that I have. It's by no means my entire team. My entire team is probably more than 50 people on this engagement. All right, so we issued our the audited financial statements, our audit opinion on October 29th, 2024 for the standalone financial statements. It was an unmodified, clean opinion. We also issued our ACFR opinion, the opinion on the ACFR yesterday, so that was dated 12/18. This is just the audit timeline that we have here. All right, so responsibilities in a benefit plan audit. So a full list of responsibilities you could find in our engagement letter for this audit. So I'm just going to go over a couple of bullet points here. So those charged with governance, you, the board, are responsible for overseeing the financial reporting process, discussing significant accounting and internal control matters with management, informing us of fraud or suspected fraud, including your views about fraud risks, and informing us of any other matters that are relevant to the audit. And management's responsible for presenting or preparing and fairly presenting the financial statements and any required supplementary information, designing, implementing, and maintaining internal controls relevant to the preparation of financial statements, maintaining sufficient records with respect to participants. And then we, as your independent auditors, are responsible for obtaining reasonable assurance about whether the financial statements as a whole are free from material misstatement, whether due to fraud or error, and then issuing an auditor's report that includes our opinion. All right, so we approach the audit using a risk-based approach similar to prior years. We have identified significant risks. First significant risk here is management override over internal controls. It is a presumed fraud risk in professional standards, so it's not just applicable to this type of audit, it's applicable to all audits. Basically, it's the risk of manipulating the financial reporting process by recording inappropriate or unauthorized journal entries or making any adjustments to amounts reported in the financial statements that would be omitting, obscuring, or otherwise misstating information. So to address that risk, we obtain an understanding of the financial reporting process and the controls over journal entries and other adjustments, as well as the suitability of design and implementation of such controls. We made inquiries of individuals who were involved in the financial reporting process about any inappropriate or unusual activity relating to the processing of journal entries and other adjustments. We consider any fraud risk indicators, the nature and complexity of the accounts, and any entries processed outside of the normal course of plan operations. And then we select journal entries using whole ledger analytics. Based on our procedures performed, controls appear to be designed and implemented appropriately, and individuals appear to have the appropriate authorization rights. Another significant risk here is valuation of investments for the alternative investments. Similar to prior years, alternative investments consist of investments in investee funds that have coterminous year ends. Most of the investee funds have an accounting period of December 31st, whereas the system has a year end of June 30th. Because of these non-coterminous year ends, there's a risk of potential fair value adjustments that may call into question the appropriate application of net asset value. Similar to prior years, there's typically an audit adjustment that we propose that is passed on related to the fair value lag for the alternative investments. So there was that adjustment. Okay. Investments and investment income. So we've confirmed investment positions. We evaluate the reasonableness of the fair value disclosures. On a sample basis, we test the fair value of the investments that are selected. We also test the reasonableness of investment-related income, including net appreciation, through testing a sample of purchases and sales throughout the year. We also evaluate the reasonableness of investment expenses. So aside from the audit proposed adjustment related to the alternative investments, and there was a disclosure adjustment that was corrected related to unfunded commitments, no significant exceptions were identified in this testing. Another area of testing is employer contributions. So we evaluate the skills of the individuals who oversee that process of capturing that information, as well as the controls over the calculation of the contribution. We didn't identify any exceptions with that. Another area of focus is benefit payments. So we test the completeness of the population of benefit payments, and then on a sample basis, we review supporting calculations and documentation that one, the member was eligible for the type of withdrawal requested, that the benefit payment was appropriately authorized, and that it was calculated based on plan provisions. We didn't identify any exceptions as it relates to that. And then total pension liability. So we utilize our in-house actuaries, our Wealth and Human Capital Services, who assist us in evaluating the reasonableness of the actuarial assumptions and inputs used in the calculation of the pension liability. Then we test the inputs. The biggest input is the census data, the demographic information in the census data. We test the completeness and accuracy of the census data. And using one of our automation tools, our census automation, we compare the prior year census data to the current year census data. And what that does is it identifies any changes in the census data, both expected, such as drops and adds, and unexpected, such as changes in demographic data. And then we focus our testing on those changes. There were no significant exceptions noted as it relates to that area. Other areas of focus included member contributions, member loans, and information technology general controls, or ITGCs. Okay, again, as I mentioned earlier, for the risk of management override over internal controls, we test journal entries. We use the whole ledger analytics. This slide just goes a little bit over on what that means. All right, ITGCs, Information Technology General Controls. So the areas of focus, the in-scope systems were CPMS, PMS, and NICAPs. Areas of focus included security administration, program maintenance, program execution, technology operations, and cybersecurity. Again, we issued an unmodified clean opinion. There were no scope limitations. Pleased to report we had some open and effective communication with management, and any internal control and best practice recommendations were discussed and will continue to be discussed with management. We issued the opinion on the act for yesterday, and it did include the GFOA Certificate of Achievement for 2023.
Yes.
All right, we talked about the adjustments, which are also included in your package. All right, so I'm also required to communicate these matters on the slide to the extent that they exist. I'm not going to go through every single thing because not everything is applicable for this audit, but we were not made aware of any fraud or non-compliance with laws and regulations. I'm pleased to report there were no significant deficiencies or material weaknesses that we've identified. No disagreements with management, no significant issues or significant difficulties were encountered, and there were no material inconsistencies between the required supplementary information and the information in the financial statements that was not revised. Okay, I'm also required to communicate the quality of accounting practices. So the significant accounting policies are detailed in the basic financials, in the notes to the basic financial statements are considered appropriate in all material respects and consistent with the prior year. The most significant estimates were the fair value of investments and the total pension liability. And then we've assessed the financial statements and disclosures for clarity and completeness. Footnote disclosures of the financial statements appear to be informative, consistent, and clear. All right, so our firm maintains a robust quality control system supported by comprehensive policies and procedures that meet or exceed regulatory requirements. This slide goes over those independence matters that we discussed. I'm pleased to report that we are independent for this audit. Okay, the slide goes over some of the audit innovation technologies that we use throughout the audit, and we continue to evolve the technologies as we move forward into the future of auditing. All right, so for the use of others. So again, as I mentioned earlier, we use our Wealth and Human Capital Services team, our in-house actuaries, to review the reasonableness of the actuarial assumptions and methods that are used to determine the total pension liability. We also use our New York pricing group to assist us with the investment valuation of investments. Subcontractors used this year were Galeros Robinson, similar to that used in the prior years. And then we also use the personnel, technology, and resources of Grant Thornton Advisors, LLC, and the technology and resources of our shared services center located in India. A copy of the management representation letter was provided to members of management. This slide goes over New Mountain Capital investment and our alternative practice structure, independence considerations. So the Grant Thornton LLP, which is the licensed CPA firm, has continued to provide audit and attest services. Nothing has changed with regards to that. The new entity, Grant Thornton Advisors LLC, was created, which is receiving the New Mountain Capital's investment. So from an independence perspective, the alternative practice structure doesn't change our independence or ethical requirements for either firms or the professionals. And so we've established ongoing monitoring procedures to protect independence of audit clients under the new structure. So what procedures that we've done this year were inquiring of management, whether they were aware of any business or financial relationships with New Mountain Capital or the investments in or participation of the debt of Grant Thornton or GT Advisors LLC. We evaluate the relationships for independence purposes and discuss with our national office or subject matter experts as necessary. We obtained new written representations from management that, to the best of their knowledge, they have disclosed any relationships that may exist or are being considered. Then we follow applicable communication requirements for relationships that may bear on the firm's independence. And so we've concluded that we continue to be independent. Okay, that concludes my presentation. Does anyone have any questions?
Any questions? Any questions? Seeing no hands. Thank you, Sharon, for your report.
Absolutely. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity here, and I'm going to drop off with the rest of my team, but I do want to wish everyone a happy and healthy holiday. Thank you very much.
Same to you.
Bye.
Next item actually requires a vote, and I see, yeah, we have to wait because we have, I think, 2 people who stepped out real quick.
Can we introduce it?
It's actually great.
We can do.
Oh.
Actuarial interest rate is a discussion. And then he voted to table. Because it was a. Oh, you have board. Oh, you're gonna get it done, Willie.
Yeah, what is required to vote?
But the next is discussion.
She got to speak.
Actuarial interest rate. Murder.
No. Strongly advocated.
Number 10.
Someone else leave? I just went out to get Dorset in the back.
So why don't you go to number 10, Donald?
Yes, non-voting, voting on.
We can't. Still.
You need to have one.
And the other thing is
Discussion.
No, I'm back. Yeah, okay, I'm back, so you need my.
I know it's, yeah.
Yes, I should have spoken.
Very much.
I can hear whoever.
Someone walked out after we started the discussion. We were gonna stop the discussion.
Let me see.
Oh my God.
How you doing?
Hey, how are you?
She has her stuff on here. Did she take her
It's
computer?
all right.
How would you feel about
Yes.
limit from?
Yeah, something going on.
Teachers came in. I would say also we can as limit the board and make a proposal to limit those per meeting.
No.
For what our full board is. I'm saying, when we bring it up in next month, because it could be a question. Out there, so it's like a plan put 2 years ago. We could have this 9 as normal boards that are 24 people, 14, 15 for we would have to have, you don't wanna. We could, as teachers would have to approve it, BERS would have to introduce it.
Here with them.
35.
Yeah, we talked about it when we did it. We could, and you're cool, yeah.
Yeah.
No, we never heard of one though, to adopt it.
No, I know.
So we can make it a reasonable function.
See, ironically, God is good.
Make it a make it a subcommittee. Instead of executive, make it a subcommittee.
Yeah, he broke it down for me. So I was going to, I said, well, we should. And then after the vote, I'm all about where it's in.
It's mandated by the law, it's mandated in city, and the city.
You do anything but the break. That's not fun. It's kind of your best space. Yeah. That's why I was late.
The way it's structured, they're specifically mandated.
That's exciting. Congratulations. I would
like to know that.
That'll be good.
Yeah, but then we wouldn't be
It's literally right across the
three Donalds and, one controller, one mayor, and that was it. That's what we're different structure than any
Have some like crossover time so that maybe and they're super flexible.
Because then I want to bring this up next.
Yeah.
Big mouths like you need to be okay with it because you're a big mouth.
And some of their kids may be eligible.
Have said that kind of.
I'm still amped up from last night. No, sorry. I was triggered last night. You know what I told you? Oh, I told you. I watched the Jamie Foxx special last night.
No, Jamie Foxx got you.
That was fun. There was talk. I had to shed a tear. This is crazy.
Yeah.
This is crazy. No, I'm saying.
I'm just throwing this out.
It's clear. And leave now. Now we can't leave.
Sure, Marielle, you're the problem.
I guess if we started the discussion, someone will not this. Can't start the discussion with.
Yeah.
She might be on a call.
Yes.
Get down the block to my house.
No.
Come on, Chef.
She didn't give it to me.
All right, it's true. Sorry, I was trying to move.
I was waiting, but yeah.
I get you. Listen, you're a trooper. I know you don't want to be heard often.
No, I don't want to waste.
She coming back, right?
Yes.
I got you. I feel you.
We're gonna move on.
We have an unwieldy 25. And listen, I know a lot of, when you came on the board, did you know that you were on?
Recording has been resumed.
Find someplace else.
The next calendar item is calendar item number 20, adoption of the Disability Committee's recommendations. May I have a motion to consider?
Moved.
Motion by Shirley, second by Tony. Dallas?
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. So for the Disability Committee meeting held on September 24th of 2024, there were 7 cases presented to the committee with 7 recommendations, and 7 recommendations, issued for all 7 cases.
All those go to a vote. There was Disability Committee met. There were 7 recommendations that were made, that the committee made and the committee members that met. And now we're going to vote to approve their recommendation. All those in favor of this calendar item, please indicate if you're in favor. Favor. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Next item for this afternoon's meeting is an attorney-client session. Karen, please turn off the recording.
Recording has been resumed.
What's next on the agenda, Donald?
Executive committee to approve certain transactions.
Well, January.
It's hot as hell.
When she puts the bill back in.
That hat. Let's get Salil back.
Hat's crazy. There's no what's going on there. F back.
All right.
Like a side room.
He said somebody else just wrote on his F back. So in the 101, you're the what, fifth actuary?
So go back.
120 years.
I just messaged him on MS Teams. I don't think I have his personal.
You have. It's weird.
Yeah, can you text them? Yeah. Emailed him. Yeah. I just sent them an MS Teams. I'll text them too.
Get back on, bro.
Oh.
I've been here 22 years. I got a
Don't
lot.
act the Borsa. He's gonna
Don't worry about me. I got a lot.
keep.
Okay, he's back.
Okay, so the next item on the agenda is calendar item number 21, authorization to the executive committee to approve certain transactions. May I have a motion to consider? Kareem with the motion, do we have a second? Marjorie with the second. Salil, please tell us about this agenda item.
Sure. Let me pull up a quick presentation. This is the authorization for the executive committee to approve certain transactions. This quick presentation will go over some of the key financial metrics for the pension, as well as some benefits of this authorization for the executive committee, and then I'll talk about some specificity about this authorization. So at a high level, here are some metrics covering recent data over the last year. There's $9.7 billion in the pension. I created this slide 2 months ago, and that's the valuations at that time. U.S. equities represent 30% of the portfolio. The strategic asset allocation target weight is 34%, so that represents a $340 million under allocation to U.S. equities. The rest of equities outside the U.S. is roughly $1.2 billion. Fixed income represents 28% of the portfolio, and private markets is roughly the same size as U.S. equities. It represents 29% of the portfolio, while the target weight should be 25%, so $430 million over allocated. In terms of liabilities, and Merrick's, I think he's still in the room, he's helped provide some of these numbers. The total accrued liabilities, $7.1 billion, and the unfunded actual liabilities of roughly 5%, and these are proportional over the last couple of years. Major cash flow changes. So the cash coming into the plan, roughly $300 million over the last 2 fiscal years, and that's roughly 3.4% of mid-year asset values. And the cash going out is roughly a little bit higher than that, $360 million on average over the last couple of years. So 4.1% of the plan. So there's a little bit of cash that's leaving to pay for benefits, from the contributions. But within the plan itself, we have over the last couple of years, roughly $300 million. So in the magnitude of 3 to 4% of U.S. equities being sold, and that being cash used to purchase private market investments. Other developments, a strategic asset allocation was last performed at the beginning of 2023 calendar year, and it was approved later that year. I've helped work with Merrick and his team. They've done a good job in liability risk modeling. We continue to make improvements on that. And then there's just ongoing research that I'm doing in this space for BERS. Some highlighted changes over the course of this year for the portfolio that the executive committee helped implement. We fired one manager in U.S. mid-cap equities, and then we approved 6 OFI investments, not including the meeting that occurred today, totaling $178 million. One was at MWBE investment, Charles Bank, and then we approved 6 private equity investments. 2 of them, totaling $30 million, were approved at the beginning of the year that were MWE, Clear Lake, and Knox Lane. In terms of performance, the last comprehensive annual financial report showed 1, 3, and 5-year numbers. You can see them on the screen over the 5-year and kind of 1 year and some other numbers. They're reasonable. They have underperformed benchmarks, a variety of benchmarks and processes. And this actually would extend whether you look at more current numbers or going back over 7, 8, or 9 years. Benefits of this authorization for the executive committee is that it allows for quicker resolution of time-sensitive investment matters, especially those that require the full quorum of the entire board. And that's proven to be, at times very difficult, especially as the number of trustees change throughout the year and the members and so forth. We often may not get quorum, and especially not quorum for the entire additional length of time that it would take to approve these investment matters that I've mentioned. It also allows excess capacity to approve procurement and contract items that at times could face difficulty being met at the full board of trustee meetings. An example of that is the next calendar item is dealing with the extension of the Oxia contract. So, this is something that we would have had a consultant roll off in mid-November, and 2 days before that, we were able to convene the executive committee in order to get some additional time and get this extension in place. And it would not have happened if we had to wait for this board of trustee meeting. The authorization specifics, this is something that happens every year, is that you get the approval that you give to the executive committee to approve new index fund managers, as well as new active public market managers up to $250 million per manager, and new private market managers for inclusion in the portfolio of up to $50 million per manager. Additionally, there could be approval that they're granted for funds that were previously approved by the board, and to basically renew previously approved strategic initiatives if the time or the dollar amounts have been crossed. So that's the sort of presentation. The ask is, for the board to authorize the executive committee for the next 1 year. Any questions about that?
So I just have a couple of quick comments. I recognize the efficiency that's been created by the executive board. I just want to point out that the executive board today is 5 individuals. Prior to when it was first created, 5 individuals was a significant number of trustees that were on this board back in 2021. And actually in 2020, in February of 2020, it was even more. By today's standards, we have a 28-person board. 5 individuals can exercise votes that 23 people wouldn't necessarily agree with, and the motion would carry and we would do the investment. So I do think the board should consider whether or not the current makeup is appropriate for a body that is now almost double the size it was when this was first created. So that hasn't changed with the time. So I think that that's something that folks should consider. I also want to point out that unfortunately, we could run into a situation where only 2 entities are represented on the executive committee, meaning the 2 labor trustees and the chancellor are already on. But if the other 2 members are mayoral appointees, and I'm not advocating that one should be anybody else, but my point being, you would have a situation where effectively 3 of the 5 people are appointed in some way, shape, or form by the same entity. And then the other 23 people have to live with that, with those decisions. So I just want to put that out for food for thought. The other thing that I wanted to raise is, and this is going to get a little wonky, there is a DFS regulation that allows for any governing board to delegate certain responsibilities to a subcommittee of the board. It's 11 NYCRR 136-1.6C, which basically, if you read it, says that board that gets delegated the duties to on behalf of the bigger board has to report back to the board what decisions were made. And I think it says even a written decision. I know we don't have a formal process for that, and I'm not suggesting that the executive committee doesn't communicate with the full board, but we don't have anything in the rules that set this up that make that a fact, that the executive committee must tell the rest of the board the actions that were taken. And I'll just say this, if there's an action that gets defeated at the executive board, but the other 23 people on the board want to re-engage, they shouldn't be prohibited from doing that because the executive committee made a decision. I just want to throw that out there, food for thought. I don't know if other people have the same, have the same concerns, but this is the appropriate forum to raise them. And I'm not trying to get on a soapbox and complain. That's not my goal here. My goal is to make this the most efficient board and to make sure that everybody is fairly represented on this board, regardless of who's appointed to be here.
If the larger board chose to delegate to a smaller group, that's the board's option.
It is the board's option, but they need
So
to.
it matters. So the number doesn't really matter.
Well, no, but they need
If
to.
we decide to do that.
But they need to report back to
It's
the.
fine, but,
Yeah, they need to report back to the bigger board, which I think formally they have to do. I mean, to
So
me,
I think that there's always reporting that comes back to all of us. It's really how much time you want to spend to being engaged in reading it, and you can't force people to do that. And so, to your point, I think the most important thing is when we decide if we're going to do this, that there is mechanisms for transparency and for being engaged if you choose to. But then there are people that don't choose to. And
I understand, but we all have to live with the decisions of the executive committee, right? Regardless of.
That's the decision we're making here by voting that to be the scenario of where we're saying, okay, we're going to choose to do this, and then here are the things that follow with that.
And the executive committee is elected. And so ultimately, let me finish. Ultimately, there's an accountability, right? If that smaller group makes bad decisions, when it comes back to the full board, they can address those matters. So I think it's appropriate, so that we can function.
That being said, I mean, I know, like a lot of people are not that interested in, you've come here and done yeoman's work to come here and be here for this meeting. So sincerely appreciate it because it's really important for the members. As PEP, we have the ability to make this a smaller subset of the group officially. And it's something maybe we should consider. Just to make sure that we don't drag people out who don't want to necessarily be here and are doing it because they're doing their duty after being at the PEP meeting till 12 last night. And, we can make it a group of.
Some of the panel members have mentioned that, and maybe we should pursue drafting something and looking at.
I think Donald had actually submitted something a couple of years ago. But,
the compensation, the size of the board.
Yeah.
But if we're ready and you guys are ready, let's submit it. Let's put it before the panel. And let's bring it to a vote in February.
Yeah,
not obfuscate this.
To be fair, I think it should be considered and maybe a message sent to the people who are not here too before voting on this, because so we can have a more equitable or most likely probably come to consensus on this. But I think it's be more fair that we actually consider I called it.
Shirley, we're going to do that. We're going to do a resolution. It's going to go to PEP. for a conversation. We're not just gonna do this arbitrarily.
No, I understand that,
Yeah,
but
we'll
maybe
come to them.
beforehand, let people think about it before just coming to
You're gonna get
ensure.
it in advance. They'll get a
Yeah.
resolution, they'll get a chance to discuss it and debate, think about it, and then decide whether to vote for it or not.
Yeah, we have to go by teachers, right? Teachers would have to approve it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll defer to council for like what the actual mechanism is. I don't know, I think some law department probably would have to tell us how to do it. I don't know of many instances where we've actually
Everyone else is pretty happy with
tonight.
it.
PRS board.
Yeah, I just don't know that I don't know what mechanism has to happen for A to happen before B happens. I don't know enough about this.
So the PEP would, oh, we're in public session.
She said she's walking because we're in a public session.
Can you even pass this, Sean?
It's legal counsel.
Yeah, this is.
Recording off.
To also to consider.
Will be in public.
Yes.
We are, we
Yes.
need to,
Session.
I'll
I'm not, I'm just saying that if it's 28, it's to think about is 5 actually representative of 28 individuals, to make those decisions. I mean, that I can understand, the concern on that, you know, too, because maybe you should add a few more to the executive committee. I'm not opposed to the executive committee making on the behalf, but maybe 5 is too little to represent 28.
Well, we're suggesting going
No.
back and forgetting executive committee.
No, so let me say this. So next month, the tradition has been every January, we start voting on those committee chairs and committee structures. So in January, as we do that, I think that is a fair assessment of that John actually made. I think that's fair. Where the only thing that for me I would disagree with is if that committee makes a decision, us then having to rehash and vote again at the full board. That
Yeah,
defeats the purpose of having a committee. I don't want to waste my time at a committee
Correct.
and then have to do the same exact thing over at the board. For that,
You know, I'm not suggesting let me clarify then. I'm not suggesting that every action that gets taken comes back. I'm just saying notification, and maybe if we're gonna discuss this in January, if 5 out of the 28 people that are on the full board want to re-engage in some action that's been taken, then we should at least have a debate at the board level. Because then there's some barrier to just putting something, recalendaring thing. I'm not suggesting the executive committee does something and then we redo it, 2 hours later in the regular meeting. I'm suggesting if there's something that was passed and enough people on the board, whatever the number is, say, I have an issue that I think it should be debated more broadly, then there's a mechanism for the executive committee to at least open that item up to the full board. I'm just more about making sure people's voices aren't muted.
I think sometimes we do this because we need to implement something. And there's a time factor, so it may be not practical to bring things back to the board that have already been enacted. And generally when we come back, when we relegated to the executive board, it was simply because we needed to either investments or other things that we had a short time frame. And to be honest, it's taken us, this is the first time we've had a quorum in how long? 3 months. No, I know.
I'm not disputing any of those things.
So I think we need to.
28 people is unwieldy.
Probably-
It's an unwieldy amount.
Can I suggest to the chair, it would be good to know what Mr. Dorser will vote on this, because we may be
You're
having a
right.
continuing conversation which goes nowhere.
Yeah.
We're down on
I'm comfortable
blind
if,
alley.
if does everybody else feeling they want to vote on this, or if people want to table,
We plan to vote on it. And the history of this plan was when the Eric Adams administration came in, we anticipated a period of time where there'd be no PEP and there'd be no governance. And the 5 representatives, we would always have a quorum of the 5, even if there was no PEP, and there was no PEP for over 3 months. So we could continue to do business. That is the original source of why we have an executive. It still makes sense right now, given the challenges we have getting quorum, right? To keep the pipeline of investments being approved and contracts.
What if PEP, as PEP, we made a smaller subset of the PEP as the actual BERS board? And it would obfuscate the need for the executive board completely if we have a more normalized board of 10 or 11 people.
There is a process for that, and we would have to be an attorney-client to discuss it, but that process is well known.
Okay.
There is conversation going on between the PEP and the chairs.
Right. So if we could do that within 2 months, then that makes this maybe discomfort or the controller's discomfort with this unnecessary.
I don't know anything about this conversation.
I think we should also
Wait a
just
second.
try to find
You
a
and I
way.
talked about it.
Oh, that's different. You said there's a company, there was a mention. There wasn't
Yeah,
like
yeah,
a sit down and a
conversation.
discussion and yeah.
But we should also still find a way, again, to be more engaging for people who are on the board, that want to be on the board, and it's not so easy to navigate. I think that it also lends for the opportunity to be more specific for neurodivergent people who may need to, see things in a different way. Some people need handouts. That's another learning, a difference, right? Opposed to working on computers. And the fact that this is such a crucial part of our membership, that and then we have to balance that with transparency. And just because people didn't roll out of the birth and canal, being fluent in finance, doesn't mean that they should not be a part of the conversation, or meant to feel as if they shouldn't be a part of the conversation. So I think we also need better ways to give people information that will keep them engaged. And so whether we have a 5-person exec board or PEP board or what have you, it's nice to see people lean in and say, hey, I don't really have to come, but I want to come because now it's just interesting.
So you guys do that. You, Alice, and you.
Status quo is fine. It's working right now. So I guess the question I'm trying to understand is, if raise your hand now if you think you're interested, and then the number should go up. But if as it is, we haven't had much interest.
I have to agree with Alice on that. So even on getting the 5 or so to participate, even in other committees, we had an audit committee where we couldn't get a new chair for several months because folks didn't want to volunteer.
I remember volunteering for everything because no one else volunteered.
So we can open up that discussion, but I will say to folks, if you're not going to be serious about being there, then why are we doing it? Also, because
it's unfair though.
Because if we're having committees where folks even volunteer but are not going to come,
True.
It defeats the purpose there too, right? To have those things. So to Alice's point, the executive committee is open to everyone to come. There are some people who consistently come. There's others that can't come, and that's no knock to anyone. Folks can't come, they can't come. But if you're going to participate or volunteer to do so, if we're opening up the discussion to even bring it to larger numbers, and folks are serious about that, then there should be some form of commitment. That's all I'm saying.
So what I was going to suggest is, since to your point, it's not necessarily hurting us today. I've been working in city government for 22 years and effectively had a version of the same job for 13 of them. So my perspective is always a lot more long-term about what iterations of a board change, and then you're stuck with what you had in the past, right? So I always think about things like that at every board over the last 13 years. What I would say is, if we could agree to at least the next time we have a full board meeting to continue the executive committee as is, and if people have tweaks, we can bring it to the next meeting and bring those, but not stop the operation, because the intent is to not stop the operation. The intent is to figure out if we're in the right place or if we need to make enhancements. I would be happy to support at least extending this until we get to the next meeting. And if people feel that they want to expand it or not expand it. The issue's been talked about in that month time or 2 months time, and we just move on from there. Is that?
It's too much delay, you know, because we've been talking about this for a long time. So I would suggest maybe a January meeting, that we revisit this, because it may be obvious that we don't have the votes right now to pass this.
So
No, but
Just
but
to- just
but
to
I
add
think
something.
just to say on this, I don't think this is talking about structure or numbers at all. This is just duties of the executive committee.
Right.
Yeah.
So are we opposed to the duties of the committee, or are we talking about expanding sides?
I heard
Which
the
is-
duties,
which
this
is
is the
to-
amendment, right?
Well, the amendment is to just make sure we report back to the full board, like
No, but
to
what
report
was
back.
being
That's the
presented
duty.
was about
The resolution.
delegating more responsibility to the executive board. I thought that was the initial.
No, actually, the
No.
resolution is to extend the authority to
The
have
same
one.
authority.
It expires December 31st.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So
You
if we,
extend it.
to have an
It's been
executive
authority.
committee meeting on January, we need to extend it a month at minimum.
That's my point is not to stop the
Okay.
operation, but if people want to change something, the ability to change something, and if.
Okay, I didn't hear. I heard he
Oh,
was
I'm
adding.
fine. Yeah, I'm fine. I'm not trying to like. I'm clear. I'm not trying to be disruptive here. I'm trying to like make sure.
We need to do it now.
Expire.
Before, like these things.
And Greg, I just picked the next meeting, meaning that like, if we don't meet, if we wind up not having a January full board meeting, at least it can
The next time we have
continue
a quorum.
until we have a quorum. That is my broader point. If it's not,
Just to know, our next executive committee meeting might be January 26th. So if there's a board meeting that gets rescheduled till after that, this would be a moot sort of.
I don't have any objection to.
Yeah, it's
to
for a
any of
year,
that.
right.
January 26th is a Sunday.
It's the 14th.
January 26th is the Sunday.
That's what I have.
1 second. January 23.
Yeah, so. Which one?
Have to be an election.
Executive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Election, that would be an election.
The full board meeting's on the 14th.
They can't do this stuff.
Can we temporarily extend for 1 month?
No, that's exactly what I'm saying, Tony, is like, let's just keep it going.
And then we'll.
And then we'll revisit it. We can revisit it when we do the board. I just wanted to raise the issues because I think that they're important. I don't make it crazy.
Yeah.
I'm worried about
Amendments being proposed to extend it for 1 month until the next meeting. Extend the duties of the exec till 1 month, and then maybe we can see other alternatives in the interim.
My only question, my only.
Yeah, I'd have to ask Greg to connect.
How about
Functionally,
Yeah. My only question becomes is that, are there objections to the duties?
She said she'll be in the vote.
No, there's no objections to the duties. If we, I mean, if we have a broader discussion on like whether or not we're gonna change duties, we can do that at any time, right? I mean, that's my, right, Sharon, we're not like, it's not one time that we can do it. We can open it up.
Board can change the authorization at any time.
So that's where my question becomes, then why would we be voting on it for 1 month versus the 1 year that we normally do?
No, I just wasn't sure if you want to do it as a package. You know what I mean, like a full.
No, because we normally do committee of appointments and volunteering, that's done separately in January.
We can talk about that in January.
The duties itself, are we willing to vote on the duties itself?
We're right,
Yeah,
right at the,
we would have to.
the controllers.
No, I'm.
He's saying no.
Do you intend to vote no, John?
It's not. No, but I don't think I'm persuading you.
Exactly 15.
Maybe.
It plays into the narrative of us being an unwieldy
Can
road
we
board.
clarify what we voting on? Are we clarifying on the approval, where is it, I'm lost here. The certain transactions, for the executive approve certain transactions. That's not the vote.
That is the vote, this extension of the powers of the executive.
Those authorities have to be extended past December 31st, 2024,
Right.
because they expire.
Okay, so why we?
Because we have because we have 16 votes and the controller's vote is 1 vote and that could hang up.
No, I'm not intending on hanging this up, but I may not be the only person here. That's why
Let's just see.
So let's move it. Let's move, call the question, let's vote.
We don't
That's
have.
it.
Yep, I can.
So to make this clear, we're voting because this it expires January 31st. I meant December 31st.
Can I act as a, she's voting yes.
She did express to me that she's
I'm voting
yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Was she heard on record?
All right, all those in favor of extending the duties of the executive committee, if you're in favor, indicate that.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Wait.
No. That's all.
Okay.
Any abstentions? The motion carries.
That was fun.
I'm looking at the crowd.
I know.
Should we just skip to discussions? We have a few items that's.
Well, now we really, because we don't have the quorum present.
Yeah, I heard it.
Meeting may be over.
Because some people had.
Why don't we have a
Yeah.
quorum?
She stepped out.
She stepped out.
Some.
But didn't she say?
There was something else.
Only on that.
We had hard stops. There were hard stop. I know there were hard stops for some people. Hard stop at 6. So if we're, I mean, we may, the meeting may be over.
Because.
I think we got. I think we
They never showed up to pay. They never showed up.
Any,
I just think we gotta show
Meeting may
No
be over.
pension board in the country is 28 people. None. Not one pension board in the country. This is ridiculous. And the fact that it's lay people and we're volunteers, you know, none of us should be castigated for it.
let me ask this question, do anyone have hard stops?
BERS should not be. There's no reason.
There you go.
Combined.
It is.
Hard stop at 6:30.
We can change it as well. But it's an unwieldy board. It plays into the narrative that people try to denigrate us.
Before Kareem comes back in. If she has 6:30, the meeting can't go past 6:30 anyway.
We have 11.
He has a hard stop.
Marine's on a meeting. That's what she's doing. She's on a meeting right now.
Fire's got a lot because they have all the union represented. The minimum is great. Well, the city of Savannah pension board has 4 people on their pension board.
She's actively speaking of the meeting. It doesn't sound like she's gonna get off that meeting.
They understand and are in finance, kind of know something about it.
Oh, okay.
I get people.
So what we wanna do, you wanna have a vote?
Try
to have another vote?
There's more votes and we can't do it without her. This is actually 15.
Of course.
Yeah.
But that
And we have a hard stop at 6:30, so I think the meeting is going to be done.
You know, a lot of stuff is.
All right.
Well, let's kind of, just before we, I just want to say that, again, every one of us people, we go into meetings where everyone else is paid to be in the room. We're volunteers in the room. We were in a meeting till midnight last night. We had 3 meetings today. So I don't want anyone to feel bad about this. This is hard work that we all put in, and I appreciate you people who are here because they're doing their duty.
Did you get your check?
No, I didn't get my check. I never got a check. It cost me money.
Let me give you a check.
And I apologize to you guys for it. But we want this to get done as well, too, you know.
You got
So
your check
thanks.
left.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got your
We
check.
adjourned?
Next
Is that it?
meeting is-
We're gonna have to evaluate.
Yeah,
It's probably the second week in January, but we have to coordinate what happens.
Yeah.
Motion to have.
Yeah, I
So-
need a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. We have a second.
You know, we can't even vote on it. We don't have-
Second, Frank.
You can go to the insurance, but
So that's Shirley, motion.
I hope you at least were entertained.